You get what you get ready for. This is Bob Harrington, Chaplain of Bourbon Street, challenging you with this thought. You get what you get ready for. I'm excited about bringing these thoughts to you and challenging you with this thought of you get what you get ready for. I'm recording this in my office down on Bourbon Street, the second block of that famous street in the heart of the French Quarter in New Orleans. So if you hear a little noise once in a while and a sound and maybe a little jazz music, maybe someone around my office kind of speaking up, I wanted to bring this message to you directly from my offices on Bourbon Street in the heart of this famous section of the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. You get what you get ready for. Now, this is the first in what we'll be calling, and I'll be calling, my 4 laws of getting. 4 laws of getting. We are basically dealing with the subject of prosperity. It is important that you understand from the very beginning that we are actually dealing with God's laws of prosperity. Let me say that again to put emphasis. God's laws of prosperity. When we talk about God, we are talking about the greatest source that man has ever known. We're talking about the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We're talking about the one who said he will provide all of our needs according to his riches in glory. We're talking about the one who said that all we have to do is believe in him and trust in him, and we can have whatever we ask. We're talking about the one who has absolutely unlimited resources. When we're talking about a law, we're talking about something that is as true as night follows day. The familiar illustration is the law of gravity. You do not ever break the law of gravity. The law of gravity breaks you. A law is something that is to be enforced. When we talk about a law of science, we're talking about something that can be counted upon every single time it is attempted. If a person jumps off a tall building, he is not going up, he is going down. That is a law. It is the law of gravity. When we talk about one of God's laws of prosperity, we're talking about something you can count on. Something you can count on. We're talking about something that is going to happen every single time that it is put into operation. We will not be discussing something on this record that might happen to you if you're lucky. We are talking about something you can count on as sure as you can count on death and taxes. Not luck. That's a pagan expression. When we talk about prosperity, we're talking about you receiving the things you want and need, and things that are going to help you and benefit you, things that will make you happier and healthier and better off financially, better off mentally, and better off socially. We're talking about your dreams being fulfilled. You get what you get ready for. The title for this album and one of the primary sources for You Get What You Get Ready For comes from a story out of the Old Testament of the Bible. A servant of God was preparing to go into battle. He asked God to help him. That is what God told him. This is what God told him to do. He told him to go down and go out and dig some ditches and then fill them with water. The servant didn't understand why, but he knew he had better do what God told him to do. Therefore, he went out, dug the ditches, and then filled them with water. The next morning, as the enemy approached, the water literally turned to blood and strangled the enemy as they began to drink. And the servant of God went on to victory. You know, the beautiful part about this is God, with this servant, didn't want to do it all by himself. He brought the servant in to do his part. God never has and never will like to do all the things by himself. He created man in order that man might do things with him. Joshua, for example, in the walls of Jericho, God could have used an earthquake to bring the walls down. He could have used a breath of his power to have brought the walls down. But he wanted Joshua to do what Joshua did so God could do what God did. That's the beautiful part about you get what you get ready for. It is important to realize that the victory did not depend completely on the power of God. The victory depended on the individual having the faith to dig those ditches and fill them with water. If he had failed to get ready, if he had failed to dig the ditches, if he had failed to fill them with water, he would have lost the battle. He got what he got ready for. You get what you get ready for. In the book of 2 Kings, there's a beautiful story in the 4th chapter about a woman who was a widow, the wife of one of the prophets. She came to Elisha and said to him, "Thy servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondsmen." In other words, the woman was simply using all the psychology she could. She was trying to remind Elisha that her husband had been faithful. Now he was dead, and she had to take care of those 2 boys. The creditor was about to come, and she needed money. She needed something that would help her keep the wolf away from the doors. She was asking for financial help. Elisha responded by saying to her, "What do you have in your house?" The woman said, "All I have is one little tiny pot with some oil in it." That's recorded in 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, the 2nd verse. Then Elisha said to her, "Go borrow vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few." In other words, Elisha told her to go and borrow all of the pots and pans that every neighbor had. Can you see the predicament this put the woman in? Here they were, one of the poorest families on the block. They didn't have anything at all. That little tiny pot of oil was everything they had in the entire house, and it wasn't worth 15 cents. The woman called her 2 sons in and said, "Now here is what I want you to do. I want you to go to the neighbors, and I want you to visit every neighbor in the neighborhood and borrow everyone's pots. Get all the pots you can, and get as big a pots as you can." Can you see these 2 boys getting into the room and saying to themselves, "Mama's lost her cool. She's just blown her lid. Mama, she's literally gone crazy." I can hear these guys talking like that. I would about my mama with that kind of request. She's so worried now that Dad's gone, she's literally lost her marbles. But the boys knew they had better mind their mother. So they began to go from house to house. It was the most embarrassing thing they had ever done. One of them would walk up to the door and say, "Hello, Mrs. Jones. May we borrow your pots?" Mrs. Jones would say, "What do you want to borrow our pots for?" "Well, Mother wants them to put oil in." Mrs. Jones knew their mother didn't have any oil. The boys were so embarrassed, but they said, "Mother told us to bring your pots." So finally, Mrs. Jones would get the pots and bring them out, and the boys had never been so embarrassed in all their lives. They kept bringing the pots back to the house. It was the silliest looking sight they'd ever seen. The house had pots in the living room, pots in the bedroom, pots in the kitchen, big empty pots. The boys would look at each other and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Finally, one of the boys got up the nerve to say to his mother, "What are we going to do with all these pots?" The mother said, "We're going to pour oil out of this little pot of ours into those pots." One of the boys almost fainted. Elisha gave very specific instructions. He said to the widow, "When you are come in, shut the door upon yourself and upon your sons, and pour out into all those vessels, and set aside that which is full." 2 Kings 4:4. Can you picture the 2 boys in the living room with their mother? All of the pots are sitting around the room, and she's standing with this little one pot that's not any bigger than an oil can in her hand, and she begins to pour. Soon all of the oil is gone out of the pot that she holds in her hand. No, it's not. All of the oil isn't gone out of the pot. It keeps coming out. And the boys stand there, and their eyes get big as saucers. They see this oil continuing to pour. Mama continuing to pour. She fills up one pot, then she goes to the next pot. She fills up that pot. She goes to another pot. She fills up that pot. The boys can't believe their eyes. Finally, the mother is screaming, "Bring me another pot. Bring me another pot. Get some pots, boys." The story ends with every single pot in the entire house being absolutely full, and she was still crying, "Bring me yet a vessel." And the boys said to her, "There is not a vessel more." And the Bible says the oil stayed. In other words, every single pot in the house was full of oil. Now let's suppose the boys went out in the neighborhood and got 20 pots. That means 20 pots were full of oil. But what if the boys had gone out and gotten 40 pots? Then there would have been 40 pots full of oil. But what if they had gone out and gotten 3,000 empty pots? Then they would have had 3,000 full pots. The widow got everything that she needed, but the fact is, she got only what she got ready for. Now, this is a law of God. He has promised that it will work every time you will work it. You get what you get ready for. This story has a very beautiful ending. The Bible says, "Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, 'Go sell the oil and pay your debt and live, you and your children on the rest.'" 2 Kings 4:7. God does not expect us to live apart from miracles. I believe in miracles. He does not expect us to get by simply our own power and ability. God has always expected his people to get by on as much as they will get ready for. This is a law of God. It is a promise of God. You can be sure that today you are getting what you have gotten ready for. Do you remember the story of Noah in the Bible? The story of Noah is the story of a man who built a boat. But in order for you to appreciate this story, you must realize we have no evidence in the Bible that it had ever rained on the earth until the time of Noah. We have no evidence in the Bible that there had ever been a boat afloat, built until the time of Noah. And here was this man building something people had never seen, a boat. When people asked him why he was building it, he said, "I'm getting ready for the flood." These people had never even seen rain, and here's Noah getting ready for the flood. The people says he spent years building this boat. I have heard of men who can sail a boat 1,000 feet from water, but can you imagine the spectacle of a man building a boat when the people had never even seen rain coming down from heaven? Can you imagine the ridicule this man had to endure? Can you imagine all of the people who had come by and laughed at old Noah building this crazy-looking contraption, an ark 100 miles away from water with no trailer hitch? They thought, now this man's nuts. Finally, the ark was constructed. Noah marched all of the animals of the forest onto the boat, as instructed, 2 by 2. Finally, they were all on board. They were looking out the few windows that there were. The people were all standing out there, pointing up at Noah and laughing and laughing and laughing. But while they stood laughing, something began to hit them on the head, only lightly. Then something began to touch their fingers. Something began to fall around them. They didn't know what it was. Raindrops were falling on their heads, and they didn't even know it. And soon the raindrops turned from a trickle into a torrential flood. The little town in which they lived became a lake. The boat began to rise, and the people began to sink. They began to cry, and they began to beat on the door. But the door of the ark was closed, and God shut the door. Finally, the first rain on those people turned into the first flood, and the first flood turned into the first massive baptism the world has ever known. But Noah and his family lived because they got what they got ready for. I love that. Noah and his family lived because they got what they got ready for. Do you remember the story in the book of Exodus of the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea? God told Moses to take all the children of Israel and head for the sea. They didn't know how they were going to get across that sea, but God told them to get ready by going down to the water. They had never seen a sea open. I have never seen a sea open. You have never seen a sea open. But God said, get ready. So Moses got ready by taking the children of Israel down to the Red Sea. When they got there, the sea rolled back in both directions. It couldn't have been the wind because there never has been a wind like that could blow in both ways at the same time. The Bible says they crossed over on dry land. Now they had gotten ready by believing God. The Egyptians who were chasing them hadn't gotten ready because they hadn't listened to God. They hadn't believed God. All they were doing was chasing Israelites, and when they got there, the sea closed up. And that was the second great baptism recorded in the Bible. But Moses lived, and the children of Israel lived because they got what they got ready for. How do you get ready? How do you get ready? See, you I'm interested in you. How do you get ready? First, make up your mind that you're going to believe God and claim his promises. Go ahead right now. I believe God and I'm going to claim his promises. What benefit do you get out of doubt? What benefit do you get by being negative? What benefit do you get by not believing? But look at the benefits you do get by believing. So just make up your mind that you're going to believe God. That's the whole key to it right there, and claim his promises. His book is full of promises for you. Let's talk a minute about faith. Most of the time we think of faith as being some little word that we use to express our belief in God. But the Bible says that faith is a force that releases the power of God in your life. Have you ever seen a huge dam? Have you ever seen all that water stored up on one side of the dam? And then have you ever looked on the other side and see those floodgates? And when those floodgates open and that water begins to rush through, a power is created so powerful that it can put lights in homes for hundreds of miles around. The Bible says that lake is God's power, and those floodgates represent your faith and mine. When you and I release our faith, when we open up the floodgates, God's power flows into our lives and gives us whatever we have gotten ready for. Second, you must take positive action that makes it God's next move. I like that. You must take positive action that makes it God's next move. Most of us spend half of our time waiting on God. When we should be standing on the promises, we're sitting on the premises. But God is waiting on you. God is saying, I created the heavens and the earth. I created you. I created a thing called faith and told you how to use it. That faith is inside you. Now release it and let it go. Let it go. When you do, my power is available to you. That's how law number 1 works. You get what you get ready for. Now let me make something perfectly clear. I chuckled there thinking that would be the way Nixon might have said it. Now let me make something perfectly clear. God is invisible. Therefore, God uses visible and tangible things on this earth for us to focus on when we exercise our faith and claim his promises. Very often I challenge people to make a contribution to this ministry. Now, I am not God, and I don't pretend to be God, but the work that is going on in this ministry is God's work. This is not the ministry of Bob Harrington. This is the ministry of God. Every penny that comes to this ministry goes into God's work. It doesn't make any difference if I wear a blue suit and a red tie or a red suit and a blue tie. It doesn't make any difference whether I ride a donkey or fly a jet. The fact of the matter is that it's fun being saved, and this ministry is dedicated to helping people find that truth out. The Bible says God will return your investment to his work 100-fold. That's hard to believe, but why don't you test it? I wouldn't have the nerve to make an offer like that. I don't have the resources to say to any human being that I will return 100-fold whatever he does. I can't say I will return 10-fold what someone does. I don't have the resources, but God has the resources. Get ready. Get ready. That's a third real major point. Get ready. In other words, get the lead out and let the Lord in. Get ready. Do you know what you have right now? You have what you have gotten ready for. Do you know how much you have in the bank right this very moment? I can tell you exactly. You have exactly what you have gotten ready for. Do you know how much prosperity you have this moment? You have what you have gotten ready for. God says that whatever you get ready for is what he'll give you. If you get ready for nothing, you're going to get nothing. If you get ready for a little bit, you're going to get a little bit. If you get ready for a lot, you're going to get a whole lot. Sometimes I say if a person will make a $10 contribution to this ministry, he's going to get a $1,000 return. If I were to write that in a letter and put it in the United States mail based simply on the authority of Bob Harrington, they could put me in jail for fraud. But when I say that if you will give $10 to this ministry and get ready for $1,000 based on the authority of God, there is not a person on this earth or in heaven or in hell who can challenge it, because God has promised it and I believe it. And the question is, do you believe it? Have you ever played chess with a chess champion? Well, I have. It is one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had. I sat one day across the chess table with a chess champion. I sat there and I fretted and I frowned and I thought and I guessed and I hesitated. And he stood up and walked around the room, looked out the window, came back, sat down, and finally I moved. Then immediately he made his move and looked at me and said, "It's your move." Then he got up and he walked around the room. And I started the process all over again. I might take 15 minutes to move, but the moment I moved, he came back, sat down and moved, looked at me and said, "It's your next move." That's exactly how God does it. We fret, we frown, and we wonder why we don't have more. We wait on God, we sit around and we twiddle our fingers, and we cry about the hard things that happened to us and all the troubled times we've had. And finally, we have the faith and courage to make one little move, and in return, God gives us something, looks at us and says, "Okay, it's your next move." This very moment, some of you listening to my voice are sitting and waiting for God to do something big for you, yet you haven't been willing to do something big for Him. The reason you have problems is that you haven't gotten ready. The reason you're broke is because you haven't gotten ready. I'll tell you this very moment that if I didn't have a dime in the bank, I'd go out and borrow something, and I'd take that money and I'd give it to a ministry like this, and I'd bow my head and I'd pray, "Now, Lord, I've gotten ready for a blessing. It's your next move." Faith is nothing more than digging some ditches on a cloudy day. Faith is nothing more than building a boat when it has never rained. Faith is walking down to an ocean when you don't have any way in the world to get across it. The way to get ready is to do something big and then expect something big. We keep doing little things and wonder why big things don't happen to us. One of the most disappointing things that has ever happened to me in life is that I place too much faith in people. Too often I use the idea that if I do something good for others, they will in turn do something good for me. It never works out that way because people turn out to be selfish. People turn out to be looking out for their own self-interest. Every time I do something good for somebody else, I get disappointed. But it doesn't work that way with God. If you do something good for God, God does something good for you. That's not just an idea that you may count on or may not count on. That is a law of God. That is a promise from God. You do something good for God, and God is going to do something good for you. You do something big for God, and God is going to do something big for you. Are you ready? If not, then get ready. Right this very day. Now is the time. Today is the day. Right this very day. Make up your mind that you're going to go dig a ditch, that you're going to go build a boat, and that you're going to cross the sea. Send your sons out to go borrow some pots. Take what little you have and give it to God, and then get ready, because God has promised that you get what you get ready for. There have been times when this ministry, just like any human being, has been confronted with hard times. But I have always had a very simple rule. I operate on the KISS theory. Keep it short and simple. Whenever we face uncertain times, that is the time to trust God even more. During those times is when I make the most extravagant plans I can make. There is nothing I enjoy more than to sit around when we do not know where the sources are going to come from to fulfill the plans that we are making, and during those hard times, make some of our most extravagant plans. Or you can feel your faith growing. The reason I do that is because God has promised me that if I'll get whatever I get ready for, and I'll always get ready for big things because God is a big God. How big is your God? What do you have? I'll tell you what you have. Did you know that Bob Harrington can tell you what you have? You have what you have gotten ready for. Do you want more? Then get ready. Then get ready. You get what you get ready for. Bob Harrington's number one law of getting. Now let's look at some of the practical ways to put this law into effect. Because I know by now that possibly I'm exciting you, turning you on with these thoughts and maybe some truths that haven't been as fulfilling to you as they are becoming right now. But I don't want to just leave you up on a mountain. I want to help you know what to do to get ready for what you want to get in life. How can I do this? Well, I want to share with you now some practical ways to put this law of getting into effect in your life. In order to be sure that you're just not merely left with inspiration and motivation with regards to this law, I want to list some practical and specific ways I think you can go about putting this law into effect in your life. Firstly, get yourself into a get-ready frame of mind. Now, you and I have heard so much about the importance of mental attitude. We sometimes fail to remember and realize how important it is. Positive mental attitude. I read every book I can that has positive mental attitude anywhere on the cover or in the content of the book. Let me show you a simple illustration of how to get ready for success. Let's suppose a movie producer were to contact me and tell me that he would like for me to play a part of a bum in a movie. Do you know how I would get ready for the bum part? First, I would get me some old clothes that were dirty and torn, and I'd put them on. I would dress like a bum. Then I would not shave for a few days so my face would look like a bum. Then I would not bathe for 2 or 3 days so I would smell like a bum. Then I would get me an old knapsack and an old half-smoked cigar that has gone out and is old, and I would stick a toothpick through it and carry it. Then I would go down to the worst part of town, maybe down by the railroad tracks. I would find me a group of bums, and for a couple of weeks I would live with those bums. I would listen to the way the bums thought. I would listen to the way the bums talked. I would watch the way the bums acted. Believe me, when it came time for me to play the part of a bum, I'd be the best bum in town. I would be ready. The way to get ready to be a bum is to think like a bum, dress like a bum, talk like a bum, smell like a bum, and live like a bum, and bless God, you'll be a bum. Now let's apply this in terms of how to get ready for success. If another movie producer were to come to me and say, Bob, I would like for you to play the part of a successful, aggressive businessman who is going places and has things under control, do you know what I'd do? I'd go out and buy me a new, expensive suit, even if I had to borrow the money. I'd get me a pair of sharp, brand new shoes. I'd shine them as bright as I could. I'd get a new briefcase, and I'd have my initials, RLH, put on it. Might put Bob on it. I'd get me a new, nice, good-looking hat. I'd even get me a little tie pin, maybe with a diamond in it, and I'd put it in my tie. Then I would find out where some successful men were hanging out, and I would slip into one of the downtown men's club at lunchtime, or I'd go over to the country club, and I would listen to those men sitting around in the locker room discussing business. I'd listen to the way they talk. I'd watch the way they act. I'd listen to the way they think. I'd buy books written by the most successful men who ever lived, and I'd listen to what they have to say. I'd learn what they have to say. Believe me, when it came time for Bob Harrington to play the part of a successful man, at least I'd know how a successful man thinks, talks, and acts. Do you understand what I'm saying about the importance of getting ready with a proper mental attitude? Proper mental attitude. You can call it positive mental attitude, but it's proper mental attitude. The same illustration that I've just used will work under any circumstance. Let's suppose you want to be a great Christian. You should do the same thing I just mentioned above. You should get ready by going where they are, listening to how they talk and think and act. Now let's suppose you want to be a wealthy person. Sounds good. Let's suppose you want to be a wealthy person. Well, I would get around some wealthy people. I'd listen to how they talked and thought and acted, because most of the persons I've ever met who have gained a fairly good deal of money did not get it by luck or inheritance. They got it by certain basic principles they put into operation in their lives. Now, another practical plan that I want to share with you at this time, something that you can apply immediately, is to plan a project. Go ahead and plan a project. You've heard it said, plan your work, work your plans. Well, plan a project, and your project will become your work. One of the ways to get ready is to make some definite plans which involve certain things you want to see happen in the future. Getting ready very often involves nothing more than the simple matter of planning some projects. Let's suppose that you would like to make some new friends. You know the best way to do this? Sit down and call every neighbor you have within 2 or 3 blocks around. Perhaps you've never met half of these people. Call them anyway. Invite them to your house one evening. Tell them you just felt like you wanted to help everybody in the neighborhood get to know each other better. Therefore, you want to have everyone over and have some coffee and cake and refreshments. You will not only have succeeded in helping your neighbors get to know each other, you will come away from the evening with 2 or 3 contacts which will probably lead you to a friendship and will possibly lead to something even more helpful in your life. It's a strange thing how people I've heard them just say this, and I've said it myself. I don't have any friends. I know many times I've said, I don't have many friends, or any friends sometime. Nobody ever invites me to go anywhere, I've heard people say. Nobody ever asks me to do anything with them. Well, why don't you start the process yourself? Did you ever stop to realize that probably other people are saying the same thing about themselves? You get what you get ready for. The way to get friends is to get ready for friends by taking the process into your own hands. Now let's say that you would like to make more money than you're making. Is this getting your attention a little bit more than friends? This may mean you need to get a new job. Do you know what I would do if I were you? I would sit down and call all the neighbors for several blocks around. I would invite them to my house for an evening. I would tell them that I just wanted to help the neighborhood get to know each other better. You may say, hey, Bob, that's a way you suggested to get new friends, not to make more money. But you see, both things may be true. It may be that the first step you need to take in terms of increasing your earning power is to increase the number of people you know and the number of people who know you. Put yourself in a position to fail. Now let me give you this thought here as I continue to give you different ideas and different thoughts of practical way. Put yourself into a position to fail. That sounds a little negative from a positive man like Bob Harrington, but let's look at that just a moment. This may sound like a strange suggestion for me to make. Many people never get things because they never get ready for big things. And one of the reasons why many people never get ready for big things is that they are not willing to take a chance. They are not willing to take a risk. They are not willing to lay anything on the line. Today, the Total Man program is one of the most vibrant, helpful, successful programs of its kind in America. Thousands of people have benefited by it. I am proud of this program. But let me tell you how that program got started. There's no way for you to understand how Dr. C.A. Roberts, my dear friend and consultant and manager, in the outset, I remember I kept bringing up to him, we need to do something and call it the Total Man program to help a man put his hand on the handle of life and get himself physically and mentally and spiritually as in balance as he possibly can, because total man doesn't mean perfect man. It just means you got your act together. It means you know who you are, where you're going, and what you're doing, and your epitaph won't be inscribed, here lies a mistake. It means you got your ducks in order. I remember in the outset, Dr. Roberts and I'd be talking, and it was only an idea, because all things are born out of an idea, dreams or visions or thoughts that you might have. And I had an idea to record some programs, and then I had to invest in some binders, and I had to invest in the recording material. And I remember over in Houston, I think it was, where we recorded the first ones, we had to go down and buy a tape recorder. We had to get some tape, and we had to get binders, and then I had to invest in some printed material. And in other words, I had to put myself out on a limb without any guarantee of return, so that if the program failed, I was going to be in trouble. It did not fail. It did not fail. And I smile here as I make that statement, because it did not fail. It succeeded far beyond my greatest expectations. Because in my office right here now on Bourbon Street, if I'd walk into the adjoining room, I'd find a complete total man department. A total man department with a total man director and secretaries working for the total man director. If I went down to the post office right now and got the mail, most of the mail would be addressed to the total man division of Bob Harrington's ministry. And if I pick up national publications and look on the back page of the Success Unlimited magazine for this month, a total man ad with responses coming from all over the world. Oh, it did not fail. It succeeded. But it would have never succeeded if I had not put myself in a position where I could fail. But I knew I wasn't going to fail because I believe in God's number one law for getting, which is you get what you get ready for. And I remember getting ready for that program, and I'll remember throughout eternity what all we have gotten from that program of the total man. The primary thing I want to suggest to you as a practical step toward making this law work in your life is for you to plan something specific and new that you can attempt, which you never have attempted before. The Total Man program for me was new. Our motivational program for me was new. I had never in my life attempted a program like that. I had never heard of another preacher who had attempted a program like that, another minister. I'm sure there are others out, but at that time I had not heard of a minister doing that. Put yourself in a position so that something good can happen to you. That's a good posture for yourself, to be in a position that something good can happen to you. It is extremely important for you to understand your future does not depend upon fate or upon superstition or luck or something mysteriously happening. It depends upon your ability to understand that you can get certain things you want and need if you will take definite steps to get ready for them. You remember what Bob Harrington has said from the front of this record to the back. You remember, you get what you get ready for. Let me say it again. You get what you get ready for. Say it with me out loud. You get what you get ready for. Let me hear from you soon, because I have an idea that you're going to be getting a lot in the future because you're going to be getting ready for it. Thank you for letting me be a part of you getting ready.